Well, I must say today with this graphic here behind me that I feel like I'm about ready to host a fall cooking show. And I do suppose I have one thing to say about fall cooking as we begin this morning. You know, I stepped outside yesterday before I started writing just to get some fresh air. And as soon as I stepped out of the door, I was overwhelmed with what it felt like. Gone was the thick, hot air covering me in a blanket of humidity and bugs. Fall was finally here. I could smell it, I could feel it, and fall is, above all, my favorite season of all seasons. And each year when fall comes around, I get excited for all of the autumnal things. Pumpkin spice, which many of us love. Things like cinnamon, winter vegetables, sweaters, pants, coats, scarves, thick socks, goose down comforters on the bed, fireplaces, hot tea at bedtime, walks in the woods, camping, and most of all, my very favorite thing about the fall season, mulled wine. I love it. If you don't know what mulled wine is, it's a drink that originated in the 2nd century. It was imagined by the Romans, who would slowly heat up wine mixed with spices and fruits and sometimes flowers. And this drink was supposed to promote health and to help them avoid sickness during the colder parts of the year. If you've ever been to a holiday party at CIB, you know that our friends Stefan and Julia from Germany make a German version of mulled wine for us every year called Glühwein. In other parts of the world, mulled wine is called Glögg. But whatever name you call it by, it's delicious. It's kind of sour, kind of sweet, kind of spicy, all of the flavors equally balanced, and I look forward to it every year when it starts to get cold. Now, why am I going on about mulled wine during a worship service, you might be wondering, and that's a fair point. I'm mentioning it this morning because this idea of mulling in the culinary world is something that must be understood if we're going to understand our topic for today. Today, we are looking at the topic of meditation. Yes, meditation. And I want to say this at the outset before we dive into this today. The love of God, the care of God, and the providence of God are freely given to all people. There is nothing that we are, in my opinion, compelled to do to merit these things. However, it is by meditation in which we become conscious of these things in such a way that they begin to appear on the surface, on the outside of our lives. And I know that is an earful, so let me say that again. I'll also post it over here or down here in the comments in case you want to copy it somewhere. Give me a second. Okay. Again, the love of God, the care of God, and the providence of God are freely given. There's nothing that we are compelled to do to merit such things. However, it is by meditation in which we become conscious of these things in such a way that they begin to appear on the surface of our lives. Our passage for today from the book of Joshua says this about meditation. Keep the words of God always on your lips. Meditate on them day and night, so that you may be careful to practice them. Then you will be prosperous and successful. To mull something, anything, is to mix it together thoroughly, or in the mental world, to consider it at length, or to ponder it continually. And like the mulled wine, when it is mulled, all of the flavors and properties of whatever is added to the mix gets combined. Everything in the mulling process gets softened. And the oranges take on the flavor of the cloves, and the cloves take on the flavor of the oranges. The cinnamon becomes a part of the berries, and the berries part of the cinnamon. And this takes time and waiting. It's slow. It's not something that you can make in a microwave. Low, slow heat, letting it sit often overnight, so that everything becomes one with the other things. It all mixes together and becomes one thing. And mulling in the culinary world that we do to wine, to make mulled wine. Mulling is to the wine what meditation is to the mind. It is to let things sit and to soften and to soak into us. And like the mulled wine, meditation also isn't accomplished quickly. It takes time. Keep the words of God always on your lips. Meditate on them day and night, so that you may be careful to practice them. Then you will be prosperous and successful. Perhaps one of the greatest challenges I experience in my work, and the many people who I've given spiritual advice to over the years, is this disconnect inside of them between believing and doing. They typically arrive at our church having been taught of one of two extremes about these things, and it's created an imbalance in them. Many of them on the verge of giving up on faith altogether. And I understand this. My heart goes out to people whenever they come in for spiritual advice, and I realize they're in this condition, because I have been there. And in many ways in my own life, I'm still there trying to make sense of it and unlearn these bad things I've learned myself. Many of our teachers, albeit with the best of intentions, might have never understood how to navigate this challenge either, and so they've passed it on unresolved to others, forming yet another generation confused about it in the practice of one's faith. Many are taught to believe at the expense of doing. In other words, it matters a little less how one acts than it does what one believes, because what one believes will ultimately supersede the other thing. Others, though, are taught to act at the expense of believing. In other words, that it matters a little less what one believes than it does how one acts in the world. Because how one acts is what will ultimately shape one's reality. And both of these are good things to think about and to grapple with and to try to apply and to live according to. But the fact of the matter is that they are incomplete, whether they are combined or addressed separately within one's belief system. And this is a very hard place to be in, because for many of us, in the church and who grew up in the church, we've been taught that faith is either one of these things or a combination of the two. And it just ends up leaving us conflicted. And it is a frustrating tug of war to be put in the middle of these two things. Why? Well, because it's missing something. There's an entire other thing that our passage clearly points to that we overlook so easily because it sounds so simple. Look carefully again. It says, keep the words of God always on your lips. Meditate on them day and night so that you may be careful to practice them. Then you will be prosperous and successful. We want to be prosperous and successful, whatever those terms mean in our own particular life context. We want to practice what we believe. We want to live what we believe. But the only tools that we have in our toolbox for most of us are belief and action. When what this passage clearly says is that building a life of faithful practice and success is found where? In our thinking. Our thinking. It is what we think that we become. It says meditate on them day and night so that you may be careful to practice them. In other words, we could read this passage doing no injustice to the translation if we were to read it saying, if you don't meditate on the words of God constantly, you won't be able to practice them. The ability to become what we truly long to be becomes available to us by managing the content of our minds. What are our minds filled with day and night? The words of God or something else? It's no wonder the philosopher William James would come to the conclusion when he wrote, "The greatest discovery of my generation is that a human being can alter their life by altering their thinking." It's no wonder that the Bhagavad Gita, a Hindu text that deals with the topic of meditation, says, "Wherever the mind wanders, due to its flickering and unsteady nature, withdraw it and gently bring it back under the control of your higher self." And it's no wonder that the Bible itself also says in the book of Proverbs, "As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he." What a man thinks, he becomes. There's a correlation going on here from the Hebrew scriptures, traditions from the East, and from the learned wisdom of our own philosophers, that we become and are becoming what we think about. In other words, it's not just useful to believe or to act. Those are, in fact, outcomes of something. Those are byproducts of something. We must start at the level of our thinking by asking ourselves, and often, where is my mind right now? What is filling my mind in this moment right now? What am I mulling in my mind right now? If I could define meditation for myself, I would say that meditation is the mulling of the words of God in our minds throughout the day and gently recalling them again when our minds wander from them. Again, meditation is mulling the words of God in our minds throughout the day and gently recalling them again when our minds wander from them. This is the work of the spiritual life. It sounds easy, but it takes practice and it takes intention. Catching the mind when it wanders throughout the day and bringing it back to our source, which is God. And this isn't a mandate from our Creator. It's not a threat. It's an invitation. It is God wishing for us, trying to help us, to make it simpler and easier to attain. It's God trying to get us to realize that it's not done by doing. It's not done by just believing. Those things come about by thinking. What fills the mind? And I'm not here to pitch a new thing to you today. It's been in the scriptures forever. I'm here to simply say, what if you missed this part somewhere along the way? And if you did miss this part somewhere along the way, would you consider giving it a try? Making it a part of your daily practice? What would your day begin to look like if you scribbled some words of God on a piece of paper and kept it in your pocket? What would your day look like if you texted yourself some words of God early in the morning and visited them on your phone throughout the day? Not so that you're striving to become something. Not because you're striving to believe something. But because you're simply putting the words of God in your mind. And whenever your mind wanders from them, reminding yourself of them, bringing your mind back to them, and letting the words do the work in you. What if that's what's missing? What if that's what's been missing all along? Could this be what Scripture means when it says in the New Testament to pray without ceasing? Could this be what makes praying without ceasing actually possible? Because we can't be praying every moment of every day. What if that's talking about something that goes on in us right here? What if God doesn't envision your life as a bunch of separate ingredients that never touch one another, but as one pot, one cauldron, one thing where all the ingredients are placed together in the wine of the Spirit and mulled thoughtfully, carefully, intentionally, slowly, so that the ingredients of your life become one with another, more integrated, more whole. What if we truly began to mull our minds as we are encouraged to in the scriptures and from learned traditions everywhere? What would we become? As we move into a time of reflection today, I want to invite you to practice this for a second along with me. I want you to just take one simple phrase from the scriptures, a commonly known phrase. It's found in the 4th chapter of the epistle of 1 John. The phrase, God is love. And as we participate in the Eucharist this morning, you're welcome to participate in your homes with whatever you have available to use as elements. As you break the bread and you dip it in the wine or the juice or whatever you have, and you receive it, following that, I want you to take a few moments to get comfortable wherever you're sitting or you're standing, to allow the distractions of the world around you just to be on pause for a second, and to let this phrase, God is love, loop in your mind. And as you do, you might find that you can't even make it through that simple phrase without your mind going somewhere else. Don't beat yourself up. Don't try harder. Just bring your mind back to it and start it over again. It might even help to do it with the rhythm of your breath. Practice just being aware of that phrase, letting it fill your mind. God is love, for a few minutes. Let's do that as we receive the Eucharist this morning. Amen.